To be vitiated.
Without objection.
And, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent I be recognized as for whatever time I shall consume as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Mr. President, there's a simple reason why we are all talking about the debt limit increase, and it's the fact that this president has spent more money than I ever believed would be possible. So far, he's spent over $10 trillion in 3 years. And next year, if he has his way, he'll spend another $3.5 trillion. I remember so well back during the Clinton administration, I think it was 1995, I was outraged. I came down to this podium and I said, can you believe a president has a budget of $1.5 trillion and this president has spent $10 trillion in this short period? If he hadn't spent all of this money, then we wouldn't be here talking about a debt limit increase right now. I hate to sound so partisan about it, but it's truly a partisan issue. The Democrats have supported his spending and the Republicans have not. The Boehner plan that we're going to vote on, they're going to vote in the House today, and I think we might have an opportunity to vote on here later on tonight. Now, it may not be perfect. None of the stuff around here is perfect, but it's good. It is good, and it has dramatically improved over the last 12 hours. It allows the debt limit increase, but only after we significantly cut spending. Never before have we tied, in the history of this country, a debt limit increase to spending cuts. But it's something we have to do now, and that we are so far into this mess. The first step of this plan cuts spending by over $900 billion in exchange for $900 billion increase in debt limit. That will last the president until around February. And I think it's a fair deal. I'd like to cut the spending more, but we can only do so much when we only control the House. The second step of this plan is also good. It establishes a mechanism to quickly consider $1.8 trillion in additional spending cuts between now and the end of the year. It also requires Congress to pass a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution and send it to the states for ratification. Now, this is something that just happened in the last 12 hours. People are talking about, well, we really want to do something. A balanced budget amendment is the only way it's going to be good for now and for the future. And we've been talking about this for many, many years. I remember so well way back in the 1970s. I was in the state Senate in Oklahoma when Carl Curtis, a very wonderful gentleman from Nebraska, he's a senator, had been a senator for quite some time. He was the perennial author of the balanced budget amendment, but he never could get it through. But he had an idea. He came to me in the state of Oklahoma and he said, you know, Inhofe, we have been trying to get this balanced budget amendment for a long time, and the excuse they use is you're never going to get the required number of states to ratify it. He said, I've come up with an idea. We will get 3/4 of the states to pre-ratify a balanced budget amendment constitution, to the Constitution. Well, that's kind of an ingenious thing. And he said, why don't you be the first state? And so I did. And we passed by resolution in my state of Oklahoma in 1975, I believe it was, a ratification of a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution that didn't exist. That's kind of neat. And we actually got up to almost 3/4 of the states, and some of the other forces knocked it down. But that's how long we've been doing this. But in the intervening years, there hasn't been 1 year that we talked about a balanced budget amendment that hasn't come up for discussion. Well, this is probably the first time that it is a possibility, because we've never been in the spending situation that we're in right now. As I said, $10 trillion in just 3 years. So right now, we added that just in the last 12 hours, and if that legislation passes, the President will get an additional debt limit increase. So we're tying it to behavioral patterns in spending and austerity, and it's a smart way to do it. This proposal would keep the debt limit and the spending debate at the forefront of the national conversation. We must have this conversation. If we don't, we'll be worrying about things a lot worse than an increase in the debt limit. The President wants nothing to do with this. He just wants a blank check to increase the debt so he can continue to raise deficits. Why do I think this? Well, if we undid all of his policies today, the policies that so rapidly increase the spending and are killing our economy, then we wouldn't need a debt limit increase. The President's spending addiction is the only reason. Now, this is unilateral. This is the President of the United States. This was his budget. So it's not a group of people, it's him. And a lot of people are looking at Washington and say, don't any of them really care? Well, there's one guy that doesn't, and that's the President of the United States. His action are what we're talking about today, and we'll look at the failed policies. First, we have Obamacare. There it is, Obamacare. Now, we're talking about right now trying to get something like $800 billion in all these negotiations so that we can increase the debt limit in one fell swoop, $1.5 trillion. This plan costs the estimated over the current decade. Once it's fully implemented, the 10-year cost nearly doubles to $2.5 trillion. This law dramatically expands the government's influence and involvement in the health care sector, and together with Medicare and Medicaid, it will result in the financial ruin of this great country. So that's $1.5 trillion. Second, we have the failed stimulus plan. We all know that it didn't meet any of Obama's expectations. Of course, it clearly met all of mine. I didn't expect much. It didn't help the economy a bit. It only expanded the size of government. I can remember when we, down here, even though we were opposed to it, I'm among the most conservative members. Senator Boxer's a very proud liberal, and she and I together tried to have an amendment to take some of the money, the $800 billion, and put a large amount into infrastructure. Right now, we have to have roads and highways and bridges. That's what we're supposed to be doing up here. And, of course, they didn't do it. Only 3% of the $800 billion went for that type of infrastructure. Over a trillion of this amount, once you add the cost, that's how we get up to $1 trillion, the cost of interest that we have to pay for the extra spending. So that's a total now of $2.5 trillion. So you've got your stimulus, $1 trillion, your Obamacare, $1.5 trillion. Then there's the President's relentless pursuit of legislation for regulation. And what we can't get through legislation, he does through regulations. Whatever the President hasn't been able to legislatively accomplish, he is attempting to do it through regulation, most of it through the Environmental Protection Agency. Now, cap and trade is a good example. You know, we debated that since the Kyoto Treaty was up, and clearly the votes aren't there. Right now, in this chamber, you wouldn't get 25 votes for a cap and trade. And yet everyone's talking about how that's important. We're going to have a cap and trade. So now he's trying to do it through regulations. Now, that alone would cost the American people $300 to $400 trillion a year, not just one shot. That's a year. He has his Boiler Mac legislation. That's maximum attainable emissions and maximum obtainable control technology. In other words, what can we do? What do we have the technology to do to stop emissions? Well, we don't have it, but he has that, and of course that is billions of dollars a year. Ozone regulations, I understand he was going to announce this week a tightening of the ozone regulations that would put 608 of our counties in America out of attainment. I'm from the state of Oklahoma. It put 15 of our counties out of attainment. That means in those counties, they can't recruit industry. They can't hire people. Many of them will have to go out of business because of these ozone regulations. And it's not even, in my opinion, legal the way that he's doing it, because he's supposed to be addressing it every 5 years. And when he did it, when it was done in 2008, it was done on new technology. That's a requirement. And yet today, he's trying to do it using the same old 2008 technology. Again, extremely expensive. It's cast a tremendous cloud over the uncertainty in the business sector, and that's a key reason why it has announced today that the economy is only growing at a rate of 1.3% a year. That's terrible, especially when you consider the recession that we're in. Generally, as a general rule, economies recover rapidly when coming off of a financial recession. It's not unusual for countries to grow at 4%, 5%, and 6% for the years following a recession, but we can't even get around 2%. This has a huge negative effect on the economy and on the government. The President's regulatory agenda is the reason for our unemployment rate above 9%, and it's the reason that our economy is growing so slowly. And because of this, our tax receipts are way off their historic levels. Now, if we can get the economy to grow faster, to sustain in a sustained period of time, the effect on tax revenues is really unbelievable. I used to say, and it's pretty well accepted, that for a 1% increase in the economy, it equals about $50 billion in new revenue. And that's the way to grow revenue. Certainly, President Kennedy knew it, President Reagan knew it, and so the best way to increase revenue is to get the economy moving again, and of course increase the economy. If the economy grows at a rate of 1% faster than presently forecast for the next decade, then federal tax revenues would grow by nearly $3 trillion. And I conservatively estimate that the cost of federal revenues of the President's regulatory agenda has been $1 trillion. So we have there, through his regulatory behavior, another $1 trillion. That brings our total to $3.5 trillion. Then there's an increased non-security discretionary spending, which added up to $500 billion in spending. So we have now the cost of $500 billion, and there's expanded and increased spending on unemployment benefits, which are also a consequence of his regulatory policies that have killed the economy and its recovery, and the cost of that is another $500 billion. So together, all these failed policies add up to $4.5 trillion contribution to the federal deficits. Since Inauguration Day, the debt has increased by $3.7 trillion. It's on pace to increase by more than $5 trillion by the end of the President's first term. If we undid all of these failed policies, we wouldn't find ourselves in the situation we're in today. We wouldn't be here today debating this, because it wouldn't be necessary. It's because of the President that we are even talking about raising the debt ceiling today. If we could undo the President's policies, we wouldn't need to raise the debt ceiling at all. And where's the President? He's been totally absent from this entire debt conversation. Today he's meeting with a terrorist from Cote d'Ivoire, and he's probably going to go and play golf in the afternoon. I don't know. But he's not around here. He's not participating in this. He doesn't seem to care about debating the debt ceiling. He just wants to raise the deficits. And if he did care, he'd see the need for the Boehner Plan, endorse it, and sign it into law. But I guess that's too much to ask. Well, we're going to have a chance to do this tonight. We're going to have a vote over in the House on the Boehner Plan, I think around 6 o'clock, and then it's going to come over here. We'll have an opportunity to do that. And if the Democrats will support just a handful of them, we will be able to get that passed. So we'll wait till tonight and see what happens. And, Mr. President, since I mentioned the terrorist who's visiting with the President right now, let me kind of elaborate a little bit, because it's something that people are really kind of looking the other way right now. They don't know what is going on in Africa, and I have been on this floor 9 different times talking about the atrocities that have been committed in this little country called Cote d'Ivoire. They had a president there by the name of Laurent Gbagbo. He and his wife were great people, friends of this country, and an election took place that I stood here and showed how it was fraudulent, and a guy, his name is Alassane Ouattara. And right now, as we speak, at this very moment, President Obama is meeting with the rebel leader and the potential war criminal Alassane Ouattara in our nation's Oval Office. This is an unwise and grossly misguided decision on behalf of President Obama. It is, in fact, an outrage that our President would welcome with open arms a man who's responsible for at least 3,000 people in the displacement of 500,000 refugees in the African country of Cote d'Ivoire. Ouattara is an illegitimate usurper who has scandalized Cote d'Ivoire's electoral system and unlawfully ousted Democratic incumbent Laurent Gbagbo. Beginning last year, Ouattara fraudulently won Cote d'Ivoire's presidential election. And after President Gbagbo revealed the fraud, he led a rebel army that violently overthrew the Gbagbo government with the support of the French military, which wrongly intervened in this former French colony. This is a picture, Mr. President. This is one of Ouattara's death squads going through, murdering, maiming, raping. It's happening right now as we speak. And who is in the President's office? Alassane Ouattara. As a result, Amnesty International reported on July 28th that 500,000 Ivorians are displaced in post-election violence and are prevented from returning home because of a climate of fear that continues to reign in this country. Amnesty International specifically singles out Ouattra's security forces and his state-sponsored militia composed of dozens of Dozos, they're called, who continue to target pro-Gbagbo ethnic groups. Dozos, traditional hunters, are mercenary groups that both Amnesty International and the International Committee of the Red Cross for carrying out the massacres in April of at least 220 people in the western town of Dequay. Now, here they are, folks, Mr. President. See the charred bodies down here? All murdered by the Ouattara, who's in the President's office right now as we speak. There's the executions going on. There's the burning and beating in the back of one of the opponents, one of the political opposition. And that's what's happening today. Amnesty International alleges that these forces under Ouattara's command are continuing to engage in, I'm quoting now, documented crimes under international law and human rights violations and abuses, including extrajudicial executions and other unlawful killings, rape and other sexual violence, torture, other ill-treated and arbitrary, I'm reading now, this is from Amnesty International, and arbitrary arrest and detention, as well as the consequences of high levels of displacement, pervasive insecurity, and intentional destruction of homes and other buildings not justified by military necessity, end quote. And what they're talking about is this. You can see this person being tortured to death. This actually was someone from the cabinet. Wasn't this one from his cabinet? Yeah, he was from the Gbagbo cabinet. And he's tried to make the statement, Ouattara has tried to say that he's hiring some of the Gbagbos, the previous administration. That's what he's right in the middle of killing. He died right after that. This right here, they're executing someone. This is another person that was they found was a Gbagbo supporter. This is happening today as we speak. Ouattara's bloodletting seems unabated, and he does not seem to be interested in restraining his forces from eliminating perceived pro-Gbagbo supporters. He does not deserve an invitation to our White House or an audience with the President in the Oval Office. Instead of participating in our nation's budget crisis, President Obama is meeting with this killer and the human rights abuser even today, while Alassane Ouattara is in the President's office. His death squads are roaming the streets of Abidjan. It's an outrage, and maybe now we understand where some of the priorities are. With that, I'll yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
The chair recognizes the senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. President. Too many Ohioans are struggling. Mr. President, I asked the unanimous consent to vitiate the quorum.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. President. Too many Ohioans, as they are all over the nation, are struggling in this economy. They're watching Washington with disgust as some politicians are risking economic catastrophe. The House of Representatives continues to waste time as our nation stands just 4 days away from a catastrophic default. Instead of working with us on a bipartisan basis in the Senate on a compromise measure to prevent a crisis, House Republicans are cutting closed-door deals to find votes in a bill that has no chance of becoming law. We're simply running out of time for these kinds of games. Only a bipartisan bill coming out of the Senate, negotiated with Republican leader McConnell and Democratic leader Reid, provides hope for a way out of this impasse. As the majority leader moves forward, I ask my Republican colleagues across the aisle here to proceed with its work, not delay with the resolution with filibusters and procedural tricks. In the spirit of continued compromise, Majority Leader Reid has come forth with a plan to reduce the deficit by $2.2 trillion. It's truly a compromise because it meets the Republicans' main criteria. It incorporates some of Senator McConnell's language. It contains spending cuts to roughly match the debt ceiling increase through 2012. The spending cuts in the Reid plan are ones that Republicans had previously agreed to and in many cases advanced. And it contains no revenue increases, all criteria and demands from overwhelming numbers of Senate Republicans. Majority Leader Reid's plan is not perfect. It's not the balanced approach that I hoped it would be. But most importantly, right now it prevents a default. It reduces the deficit, a critical imperative for our children and our grandchildren. It protects Medicare. It protects Social Security. It protects Medicaid. My office is being swamped with calls and emails from Ohioans who cannot believe we are so close to default. I can't either. Let me read a couple of letters from Ohio voters. Both of them self-identify as Republicans when they write to me. One says, I'm a 40-plus-year-old Republican in Marcy Kaptur's district, that's in northern Ohio along the lake, who has tried to work to, he goes on to eliminate the tax money we use is now paid to oil and gas companies as tax subsidies. I don't like my tax money being given to these companies with senators' blessings. That said, he writes, I would like to ask both of you, he sends this apparently to my colleague, Senator Portman, to support a balanced approach being proposed by the President and put debt deficit to bed until an election can be held and the American people can determine who should be in Congress. We should have listened to Ronald Reagan when he said that this should not have been undertaken, meaning the debt limit issue. The deficit is on past bills and should be raised and not, the debt limit is on past bills and should not be raised and not be used as a political volleyball and upset our financial institutions. Another writer wrote, again a Republican, he said, I did not vote for our current president, but I have to side with him in the debt ceiling issues. I'm exhausted by the political bickering that goes on in Washington. Quit the childlike fighting and get this thing done. The American people are tired of it all. A default would risk what amounts to a permanent tax hike on all Americans. Interest rates could rise for anyone applying for a home mortgage, a car loan, a college loan. Credit costs for all borrowers would climb. Governments at every level, businesses, not-for-profits, homeowners, credit card holders. Several states have already been placed on a credit watch. Every state would be hurt by a federal default, which is why governors of both parties are calling for a deal. There could be repercussions for pension funds and money market funds that guard the retirement savings of middle-class families. A default on our obligations will be a knockout blow to the financial security that public employees, through the Ohio Public Employees Retirement System, public employees who have spent their lives working in Ohio's courts and Ohio's schools and Ohio's many other public servants in local and state government. That's why the director of OPERS, the Public Employees Retirement System in Ohio, sent a letter with 9 of her colleagues pleading, Quote, America is now a debtor nation. It must show the world that the nation's word is its bond. It's critical that the debt ceiling be raised to avoid a default. The Public Employees Retirement System obviously represents Republicans and Democrats alike. As a member of the Senate Banking Committee, I heard Chairman Ben Bernanke, a Republican appointee, speak to the Banking Committee in March. He said default would be an extremely dangerous and very likely recovery-ending event. Just today, several mayors of Ohio's large and medium-sized cities, the cities, for example, of Hillsborough and South Euclid and Chillicothe and North Royalton and Lancaster and Akron and Middletown and Shaker Heights and Reynoldsburg and Dayton and Steubenville and Solon and Newark and Fairfield and other cities, Republicans and Democrats alike, medium-sized small town and large cities alike, wrote as mayors, we rely on the partnership of the federal government to help us create jobs and grow our communities. Uncertainty, think about this, uncertainty surrounding the federal budget puts key programs like the Community Development Block Grants and Community-Oriented Police Services in jeopardy. Job-creating infrastructure projects, think about this, putting people to work, job-creating infrastructure projects would come to a halt without the full support of our federal partners. Inaction on the debt ceiling threatens programs like Social Security that our citizens rely on to survive. Mr. President, I have heard the presiding officer in a meeting today, in fact, talk passionately about the uncertainty that this would inject into our economy to follow the House lead and do this again in 6 months. The irresponsibility of that proposal, where as difficult as this has been for people on all sides and the contentiousness and anger, and it doesn't matter that we're angry or contentious around here. What does matter is the message that that sends to Main Street, Connecticut, and Main Street, Hartford, and Main Street, Columbus, and Main Street, New Haven, and Main Street, Toledo, that when businesses are thinking about expansion, they're thinking about taking a loan out, they're thinking about borrowing money, they're not going to do it when we're in the midst of a financial crisis like we're in now. And no one, if we were going to do this again in 6 months, you can bet that we'd have the same kind of divisions, the same kind of arguments and businesses as the Assistant Majority Leader told a story today about a Chicago business person who is terrified of this kind of what would happen if we didn't raise the debt ceiling, if we went into default, and what might happen 6 months from now if we went through it again. So the responsible position is this body bipartisanly works on the McConnell-Reed plan. We pass this. It goes to the House of Representatives. They pass it. We focus on job creation. We focus on deficit reduction. But we move forward together in a way that we have not for too long.
Senator, yield for a question.
Of course.
There have been members of the Senate and House who have gone before the cameras and come to the floor of each of those bodies and have argued that defaulting on the national debt is really not a big deal. Though we've never done that one time in our history. We had one technical default for a few days, but never really defaulted on our debt one time in our history. I asked the senator from Ohio, the response he's getting back from Ohio, and I'm getting back from Illinois, from people who are genuinely concerned about a default on the national debt. I wonder if he has been hearing from Social Security recipients who are asking whether or not they'll be receiving their checks after August the 2nd if we default on our debt. I wonder if he's getting calls from disabled veterans whom we promised to stand by the rest of their lives, who receive monthly checks for their medical care and other things. Has he heard from small business leaders in Ohio, as I have from in Illinois, who are suggesting that an increase in interest rates at this moment in time is exactly the wrong thing when it comes to job creation? I'd like to ask the senator from Ohio, when one of our colleagues from Pennsylvania comes to the floor and says defaulting on the national debt can be easily managed and no one will notice, I'd like to ask the senator from Ohio, is that his impression?
It's sure not my impression. I appreciate the Assistant Majority Leader from Illinois' comments. I listen to the words, as I've read, that Ronald Reagan said. The debt limit was raised 18 times in the 8 years of the Reagan administration. And each time, It was, you know, there were people that didn't like doing it. Nobody likes to vote for that. But there was never this, let's go up to the edge and take a chance. And President Reagan always preached, as presidents have since in both parties, that this is not a risk we can take. And I know that I hear from Social Security beneficiaries, I hear from veterans, I hear from small business people, I hear from contractors around Wright-Patterson Air Force Base that they don't think we should take this risk, that some use the words terrified, getting this close to default. And most can't really believe that we're this close. I can't either. I mean, I've talked to the senator from Illinois, and I've talked about this many times over the last few months, that, you know, we figured that there would not be these lines in the sand in this belief that it doesn't matter if we default, and we would get to a solution here, and we haven't been able to. But, you know, no responsible people in elective office that I can think of in the last 30 or 40 years have wanted to go this close to default and play chicken and just think, well, maybe it won't hurt us much. But we know what happens with interest rates. We know what might happen with Social Security checks and veterans benefits and prison guard pay and airport safety and food inspectors and all of those things that matter. And I don't know why any responsible leader in this body or the other body would want to take that risk.
I'd like to ask, through the chair, if the senator from Ohio would yield for this question. He may recall the time not that long ago when we closed down the government of the United States for a period of time, and there were some radio talk show hosts who argued America won't notice, just as they're arguing now that America won't notice if we default on our national debt. I know the senator from Ohio can recall that and the fact that America did notice, and those who engineered that crisis paid a heavy political price. What I'm really getting to at this point, though, is to ask the senator from Ohio, Monday night, when the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, went on national television with the President of the United States and announced that he had a bipartisan plan, he called it, that he could pass in the House of Representatives, many of us had the impression that that was going to be done on Tuesday. Well, it wasn't done on Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday. It's only today that they're voting on it, some 5 or 6 days later. And I'd like to ask the senator from Ohio, losing that 4 or 5 day period of time when we could have been moving forward toward a compromise, the impact that has as we face this looming deadline of a default on our national debt on August 2nd.
Yeah, and this is, thank you for that comment and question. And this is clearly more dangerous for our economy and our country from Wall Street to Main Street than what happened when they closed the government down 15 years ago or threatened to a few months ago. And that's troubling, and that was damaging to our country. But we don't know what exactly would happen here. We're almost sure interest rates go up. We're almost sure that many people who are that benefit from government services directly would see those benefits go away, whether it's the Social Security check or whether it's food safety or running airports safely. All of those things would be at risk. And I've heard a lot of sort of brouhaha, or a lot of strong words out of the House and a lot of promises, but there seem to be too many people in that chamber that don't really see the seriousness of this, don't see that this really does put our economy in jeopardy. And, you know, it's not just our economy. That's the most important part of this. But it's also our reputation around the world. It's the strength of the dollar. It's the blot on our national reputation. People, I hear, I haven't been to Europe in a long time, but I hear people from around, I hear reports from people around the world that they're saying, what's going on in the United States of America, that you can't even agree on raising the debt ceiling so you can really focus on things like jobs. I had a meeting just last week, Senator Rockefeller and I, earlier this week, and there were 8 or 9 senators that joined us to talk about focusing on a jobs agenda, what we need to do to restore American manufacturing. And in a state like yours, which Illinois and Connecticut, the other senator from Connecticut was at our meeting and talked about, you know, Bridgeport and New Haven and all that manufacturing has done in this country. We're still a major manufacturing country. This is going to hurt manufacturers. It's going to mean they can't borrow to meet payroll, or borrow to expand, or borrow to create more jobs. And why would we risk any of this instead of getting this done with, focusing on job growth, focusing on getting our budget in order? We know how to do this. In the 1990s, and the presiding officer and the assistant majority leader were very much part of this. In the 1990s, we got to, one, a balanced budget, And second, we got to 21 million private sector job net increase because we passed a responsible budget. It had some tax increases for upper income people. It also had some tax breaks in it for middle income people. It also had major cuts and major investments. And we did all of that because we wrote a thoughtful budget, didn't get a lot of help from the other side, but put that aside. We did it right. We got to a budget surplus, and we created 21 million jobs. We know how to do this, but we didn't see anybody playing these kind of games. Maybe we just let the debt ceiling go and go into default. We just cannot take this chance. I thank the senator from Illinois.
Mr. President.
Senator from Illinois is recognized.
Mr. President, I want to thank my colleague from Ohio for talking about this issue because it's on the minds of everyone here on Capitol Hill and across the nation. We're getting a lot of emails and phone calls and letters, and it's understandable because this is the first time in our nation's history that we face default on our national debt. I received a letter from Amy in Germantown, Illinois. That's downstate in our We have a lot of German families in our state, and we have a town named Germantown. And Amy contacted me and said, please do your utmost to compromise on a budget solution before the deadline expires. Our family has already weathered multiple economic downturns due to the dot-com bubble burst, 9/11, and most recently the subprime mortgage crisis. We are responsible with our income, saving for our children's education and our retirement. However, we're extremely nervous about our savings and investments once again. If the United States of America defaults on its loan obligations, it's likely we'll see a significant reduction in the value of our 401k and 403b investments, as well as the investments we've made for our children and grandchildren's education. I cannot stand by another day and listen to all the elected officials in Washington talk about their convictions. Please remember your constituents and their situations. Another letter from Scott in Bloomington, Illinois. Dear Senator, I thought I'd offer you a real-life personal example of what you're doing to common Americans by dragging out to the last minute the resolution of the federal debt limit. Ironically, every August 1st, I receive a distribution from a tax-deferred retirement account. That account includes a variety of investments, not the least of which are equity mutual funds. The failure to provide leadership in Congress, along with the President and House leaders, will probably cost me about $5,000 this year. I'll never see this money again. The recent fall in the equity markets is a direct result of the nervousness you are creating by failing to resolve the federal debt limit issue, playing the usual political games. I respectfully request that you share this message with all your colleagues as a reality check. Stop your games played for your own personal advantage and start thinking about the people you're supposed to be serving. And a letter from David in Casey, Illinois. I'm retired and don't look forward to having my Social Security or Veterans benefits cut. Why is it the rich get by with no additional taxes and we are taxed and our benefits are in jeopardy? So why don't you elected officials wake up, start living like the rest of the country, put politics aside and do what's right for America? From the Lincoln Courier newspaper, from what I'm hearing, interest rates would go up, said Jim Mashinsky, revenue manager for the Illinois Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability. Some people may be more hesitant to buy big-ticket items they have to finance. As a result, sales tax revenues are going to suffer for local governments. That could start a ripple effect, the newspaper went on to write. If the consumer pulls back, corporations will be more hesitant to add to their payroll. Mashinsky said, they may cut or at the very least not hire. At this stage of the recovery, we would hope hiring would be further along. Mr. President, what troubles me the most is this is a manufactured political crisis. This is a self-inflicted political wound. 89 times since 1939, we have routinely, except for one little glitch, routinely extended the debt ceiling. We've done it under Republican presidents 55 times and Democratic presidents 34 times. It's bipartisan. All the president's asking for is the authority to borrow the money to pay for the things that Congress has spent. Members of Congress who come to the floor here and say, I will never pledge, I will never vote to extend the debt ceiling, are the same members of Congress who just weeks ago said to the president, stay in Afghanistan, stay the course, spend the money, we've got to do it. $10 billion a month in Afghanistan. For every dollar we spend, we have to borrow 40 cents. So for President Obama to keep the promise made by these same members of Congress, he has to borrow funds to do it. Now that he's asked for authority to borrow it, they're saying, oh no, we want nothing to do with borrowing the money. And that's why we're here today. Let me say a word, if I can, Mr. President, about the other issue that's being debated, and that's the deficit. And I know that you feel seriously about it as I do. The deficit in this country has to be addressed. We are leaving a debt to our children that is unimaginable, and we have to change it. I've been working for a year and a half with the Deficit Commission the President created and with a group called the Gang of Six. And we have come up with a bipartisan approach to deal with this. It is sensible. It spreads the pain, and there will be pain, to everyone across America and puts everything on the table, everything. We don't spare anyone except the poorest and most vulnerable in our nation. We basically said to people, we've got to raise revenue, and we've got to start by increasing the tax burden of those in the highest income categories. I think it stands to reason. If we're asking for sacrifice from working families who are paying for college student loans, why wouldn't we ask the wealthiest people in America to pay a little more on their taxes? Secondly, we put all of the federal spending on the table, and we make dramatic cuts in federal spending, not just on that side of the ledger that deals with non-defense, but also in the Defense Department. There are some members of Congress who are arguing you cannot cut a penny from the Department of Defense. Mr. President, when I was on the Deficit Commission, we had experts that came in from the Pentagon, and we learned that the Pentagon, Department of Defense, is the largest federal employer in America. But then Senator Conrad of North Dakota asked an important question. He said, beyond those federal employees in the Department of Defense, how many contractors, how many contract employees work for the Department of Defense? And the expert said, I have no idea. I said, well, give me a range. Well, he says between 1 million and 9 million. That's quite a range. It's evidence, I think, that we ought to look at every single contract in the Department of Defense. And believe me, there are some of them that shouldn't be there, where we're paying too much money and not getting the security we expect for our nation. So we need to look at both sides of the ledger, the defense side and the non-defense side. Save the money, keep our troops safe, keep America safe, but don't waste money on things that don't make us safe. And finally, the entitlement programs. And this is when many people across America do get nervous. I believe in Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. I particularly believe that we have a commitment to seniors who paid in their entire working lives into these programs, expecting them to protect them when they reach the age of retirement. This year, on January 1st, 10,000 Americans reached the age of 65, qualifying for Social Security and Medicare. On January 2nd, another 10,000. January 3rd, again. And for 19 more years, every day, 10,000 more people qualify for Social Security and Medicare. Welcome to the baby boom. Those who were born after World War II are now reaching retirement age, and with that, expect, because they paid in for a lifetime, to receive Social Security and Medicare. Now we need to look at those programs and ask what we can do to make them stronger, longer. We may have some disagreement exactly about how that's done, but we both agree that if we don't touch Medicare and leave it as is, in a matter of 6, 7, or 8 years, it will be insolvent, unable to pay its bills. That's unacceptable. We need to find ways to make Medicare a strong, viable program that will pay the medical bills of seniors and the disabled when they need them. Social Security, the same. The good news in Social Security, it's solvent for 25 years. You can't say that about many programs, if any, in Washington. But the bad news is, at the end of 25 years, benefits would have to be cut 22%. That's tough. A lot of people have no other source of income. What I have suggested, and I hope people will listen to carefully, small changes we make today in Social Security will play out over 25 years to buy the solvency that we need in this program for decades to come. And every penny of savings in Social Security needs to be reinvested right back into Social Security. So you don't take the savings from Social Security for general deficit reduction. Not at all. Take whatever savings are there, put them back into the Social Security program. There are ways to do this. We can do it in a sensible fashion, and the only reason I can say that with some confidence is I've done it. When I first got elected to the House of Representatives in 1983, they said, welcome to Washington, Social Security's broke, and we sat down and fixed it. We bought over 50 years of solvency at that time We can do it again. We've got to think about this in thoughtful terms, preserve the basic benefits of these programs, but give them a longer life so they'll be there when they're needed in the future. Our Gang of Six came up with a bipartisan agreement to deal with this. 36 senators of both parties have agreed to join us in this effort, and I hope that it becomes the basis for us addressing our deficit crisis, and that we avert what clearly is a manufactured political crisis coming August 2nd, and that we extend this debt ceiling so we don't hurt our recovering economy. We cannot hurt the innocent businesses and families across America that count on us for leadership. Mr. President, I yield the floor and suggest the F.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Quorum call, right?
Senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the quorum call.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to calendar number 113, S. Res. 175.
Clerk will report.
Calendar number 113, S. 175, expressing the sense of the Senate with regard to ongoing violations of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Georgia and so forth.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Hearing none. Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
President, I know of no further debate. I ask the Senate vote on the adoption of the resolution.
Is there any further debate?
Further debate? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
Aye.
The ayes have it, and the measure is adopted.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the preamble be agreed to, the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, and any statements relating to the matter be placed in the record as if read.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the consideration of calendar number 114, S. Res. 216.
Clerk will report.
Calendar number 114, S. Res. 216, encouraging women's political participation in Saudi Arabia.
Is there objection to proceeding? Hearing none. Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the committee reported substitute amendment be agreed to, the resolution as amended be agreed to, the committee reported amendment to the preamble be agreed to, the preamble as amended be agreed to, the motions to reconsider be laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, and any statements related to the resolution be placed in the record at the appropriate place as if read.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration en bloc of the following resolutions, which were submitted earlier today: S. Res. 242, S. Res. 243, and S. Res. 244.
Is there objection to the Senate proceeding? Hearing none, without objection, the Senate will proceed.
President, I ask unanimous consent the resolutions be agreed to, the preambles be agreed to, the motions to reconsider be laid upon the table en bloc with no intervening action or debate, and any statements related to the resolutions be printed in the record at the appropriate place as if read.
Hearing no objection, it is so ordered.
And last, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that Taylor Eggleston, an intern in Senator Paul's office, be granted floor privileges for the remainder of this day.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor and suggest the absence.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection, so ordered.
I rise